Throwaway as my work friends are on my main, and they don't know this is going on. Also, obligatory that this is on mobile, so spelling and grammar will be poor. This is a long one, but I'll try and keep it as short as possible. I, a 28-year-old female, got engaged to my partner of 7 years, Rob, a 29-year-old male, in May. Both sides of our family were really happy about this, and we had a big family meal 2 weeks after getting engaged. His brother lives 250 miles away and couldn't get here for that meal, so we decided to have a meal just for his family in late June when his brother would be back for the weekend. This weekend was arranged long before we got engaged, so he wasn't back just for the meal. Earlier this year, my sister Kim, a 32-year-old female, got a serious eye infection that very quickly turned into an ulcer, which scarred her cornea and left it at a high risk of a perforation. She needed a corneal graft, but her surgeon was away for 4 weeks, so she was going to have to wait until he got back to have it. However, her eye didn't hold, and it perforated the day I was supposed to be going to the family meal with Rob's brother. Kim's wife was at work and had her phone turned off, and our mom was away with our stepdad. So when Kim called me to let me know what was happening, I knew she would be at the hospital on her own. I immediately talked to my boss, and he let me go early so Kim wasn't on her own. I texted Rob to let him know what was going on, and he texted me back to send Kim his love and to remind me about the meal that night. I ignored the comment about the meal as it was the last thing on my mind. Once I got to the hospital, I was taken back into a room where Kim was, to be greeted by 3 doctors and 2 nurses rushing around trying to help Kim. I was then informed that she needed to have an emergency operation to have her eye glued, or else she would lose it. The problem was that they didn't have a surgeon at that hospital who could do it, and she needed to go to another hospital an hour and a half away. They asked if she would need transportation, or if I could take her. I said I would take her. Once we got to the other hospital, we were told that she would be having the operation at 5:30 p.m. I knew then that I wouldn't make the dinner and texted Rob to let him know. He flipped out and basically told me to leave Kim at the hospital and have her wife pick her up after the operation was done. At this point, I still hadn't been able to get a hold of Kim's wife. I told him that wasn't going to happen and that he was out of order to even ask me to do that. I then texted his mom and told her what was going on. She was really supportive and told me to stay with Kim and let her know how the operation goes. A dinner can be rescheduled. Kim's health can't. I also spoke with his brother, who was equally as understanding. I stayed with Kim. Her operation was a success, and I got her back home about 9 p.m. Her wife had ordered some Chinese and offered me some, which I happily accepted as I hadn't eaten since lunch. With that, I didn't get home until about 11 p.m., and Rob was already asleep. Rob was very short with me for days after, and we ended up having a huge fight where he told me that I should have put his brother and family before Kim. He said he was embarrassed going to the meal without me. I responded that I was embarrassed he thought I would put a meal before my sister's health. This led to another week of awkwardness between us before we finally sat down, and we sorted it out, or so I thought. 8 weeks ago, Kim got her graft, and so far, everything is going really well with it. On Saturday, his brother was here, so we went out for dinner with his family. His family were all asking about how Kim was doing, and I showed them a picture of the stitches in her eye. I thought that everything had gone really well until we got home, and he got really angry, saying that I shouldn't have brought up Kim's health issues, and I shouldn't have shown them the picture. I argued that they'd asked about her and asked to see the picture. It ended with him telling me that I needed to put him and his family before Kim, or else we weren't going to work. His family will come before mine once we are married, so I should get used to it. I went upstairs and packed a bag. I'm now at my mom's house, and he's been bombarding me with text messages and calls since I left. I do love him, but I will never put his family above my own family's health. I feel like he's expecting me to spend every holiday with his family and put their wants above my family's needs, which won't happen. I'm very close to my sister and my mom. That's not going to change. So, I don't really know how to move forward or if I even want to. Has anyone experienced anything like this before? So, how did you deal with it? Edit. For some reason, it won't let me do a full update post, even on my own page, so I'm just going to add it here. Thank you so much for everyone who commented. I replied to as many as I could, but I read all of them. Warning, This is going to be longer than the original post. A lot has happened. Once I decided to end things with him, I knew that the main issue would be getting him out of my house. I own the house outright. My grandma died 5 years ago and left her house to my mom, who sold it and split the money between me and my sister. I then bought my house with that money about a year after she died. I got in touch with my stepdad's friend, who is a landlord the day after I wrote my original post, who then put me in touch with his solicitor. He didn't have time to see me in person that day, but we did have a phone call where he gave me my options. In the UK, we have something called a Section 8 notice. This is a 14-day eviction notice, and the solicitor said this would be the quickest way to get him out. However, he could try and contest it if he wanted to, which would lead to court dates and could take months. I asked him to draw up the notice and date it for Friday, the next day. I'd already made the decision to end things with him after work on Friday, so that he could have the weekend to sort through his emotions before work on Monday. On Friday morning, I texted Rob and asked him to meet with me at our local pub after work. He quickly agreed. Not only is the pub a public space, but my stepdad and a few of his work friends go in there every Friday after work for a few pints, so I knew he would be there to step in if I needed him. Thank you for suggesting this, Reddit users. I also picked up the eviction notice on my lunch break, so I was ready to give it to him. It cost £250, but was worth it. When I got to the pub, Rob was already there, and my stepdad was stood at the bar with his workmates. I sat down with Rob and got straight to the point. I told him that it was over. I couldn't be with someone who didn't give me any support when I was going through one of the scariest moments of my life and expected me to drop my family for his. It didn't matter what excuses he could come up with. I wasn't interested. I'd made up my mind and we were done. He stared at me in shock for what felt like an hour but was probably only a minute or so. He then started saying I couldn't be serious. We'd been together for 7 years, and I was throwing it all away. I could never find another guy like him. I responded to the last comment with, I don't want a guy like you. That's why I'm ending it. I need someone who will support me when times get tough, not get annoyed that the world isn't bowing down to what he wants. I then handed him an envelope with the eviction notice in it and my engagement ring. I told him I was giving him a few weeks to find a place and be out of my house. Then I stood up and walked over to my stepdad, who had bought me a much-needed drink, and stayed with him until my ex left, still looking in shock. I knew he wouldn't approach me while I was with my stepdad, as he has always been a little scared of him. This is obviously a very condensed version of what happened. Once I got back to my mom's house, I had a single text message from him saying he wasn't moving out and was going to contest the eviction until I'd come to my senses and got back with him. "We are not over," was how he ended the text. I just turned my phone off and decided to deal with the legal side of things on Monday. There was nothing else I could do. Saturday morning, I woke up and turned my phone back on and had another text from him saying that he would move out if I paid him £10,000, as that's what he'd paid toward bills while he had lived at the house. He paid for half the electric, gas, Wi-Fi, and Sky package. Note, the Sky package is only as expensive as it is because he has to have every sports channel known to man, so his half literally just paid for the sports channels. I'd already asked the solicitor about this though, and he'd assured me that I didn't owe him any money as he hadn't contributed to a mortgage or any renovations of the house. It was just general expenses. He also knew that I don't have £10,000 just lying around. Let's say I was irritated by this and decided to ring his mum to see if she could talk some sense into him. I'll call his mum Sandra to make it easier. She was appalled by what I told her and said she would speak to him. She called me back about an hour later and asked me to meet her at the house. Rob was on an away day to watch his football team play and wouldn't be back till about 10 p.m., so I knew he wasn't there. I met her at the house with Kim, and Sandra said that Rob's brother was on his way back home, and they would have Rob out by the following afternoon. She hadn't even spoken to Rob, just his brother, but she promised he would be out. Sandra then asked me to walk her through the house, showing her exactly what was his and what wasn't so he didn't take anything that didn't belong to him. The next morning, I got a text from Rob calling me all the names under the sun for getting his mom and brother involved. I blocked him, and a couple of hours later, Sandra texted me to let me know he was out and staying with her. I thanked her, and she told me that she would like to stay in contact, and I happily agreed to this. I went back to my house after work on Monday, changed the alarm code, and my stepdad changed all the locks for me. My stepdad is also arranging for a friend of his to install cameras around the outside of the house. This will be done over the weekend. Sandra rang me on Tuesday asking if we could meet up as she had some things she wanted me to know. So we met for lunch that day. It was at this time that she told me her ex was a controlling asshole who was incredibly selfish, and the selfishness was what she had seen in Rob for so long. That's why she had commented on him being like his father, but she had hoped that was the extent of Rob's attitude and he hadn't picked up his dad's controlling behavior, which, to be fair, he hadn't up until this whole episode. She had left Rob's dad after he had punched Rob's brother in the face when he was 14 and Rob was 10. He had never laid a hand on her or their sons before, but one time was enough and she left with the boys. To her knowledge, her ex had never reached out to speak to Rob or his brother, and they hadn't spoken to their father in years. I didn't know any of this. All I had been told was that their dad wasn't in the picture and hadn't been for a long time, but Sandra had thought I knew, and that's why she hadn't told me before. However, she had found out on Sunday night that Rob was back in contact with his father and had been for the past year. His dad had been putting a lot of thoughts into Rob's head about how he is the man of the house and his family is all that matters. This had fed into Rob's selfish tendencies and had amplified them tenfold. Sandra said that she had told him to find somewhere else to stay as soon as possible, as she couldn't even look him in the face. Then Rob and his brother had a huge argument that ended with his brother telling him that as long as Rob is in touch with their dad, then he will have zero contact with him. Even going so far as to tell him to spend Christmas with their dad because Sandra is going to his house and Rob isn't welcome. When Sandra took Rob's brother's side in all this, Rob flew into a rage and said he would move in with his dad. He then left the house but came back a couple of hours later looking like he'd been crying. Turns out, his dad doesn't want him living with him and basically said he could be on the streets for all he cares. He's not putting a roof over a grown man's head. Sandra thinks that Rob is now starting to realize everything he has lost due to him listening to his dad and has seen his dad's true colors. Sandra is incredibly disappointed in him, but he's her son, so she is trying to be there for him as best as she can. However, she still wants him out as she doesn't trust him anymore. His brother still won't have anything to do with him. She has also told him to stay the hell away from me, as I don't need to be brought into this, and he has promised her that he will. Only time will tell if that's true, but I do have him blocked on everything, and if he turns up at the house, I will just call the police to get rid of him. The more Sandra told me about what had been going on behind my back, the more resolute I have become about wanting nothing to do with him. I never want to see him again if I can help it. So all in all, Rob's life is a mess, but as long as he stays away from me, then I don't care. I've been spending a lot of time with my sister and her wife as well, and my mom and stepdad, which has been great. I've never really been close to my stepdad, but this has brought us a lot closer together, which has been one huge positive out of all this. I'm not exactly happy right now, but I'll get there. There are still a lot of feelings that I need to unpack, and it will take time to move on from this whole situation. I don't think I will be dating for a while. I need to really get over all this and don't want to dump this on anyone else right now. For all those asking how Kim is doing, she's doing great. Had a hospital appointment on Monday, and her consultant said her eye is healing, in his words, marvelously, so that's a relief. Thank you to everyone who reached out to me. I hope there won't be any need to update this again, so this should be my final update. So I, a 28-year-old female, posted on relationship advice before about my now ex, a 29-year-old male. The post and update are in my profile, but basically, my ex-fiancé wanted me to put his family before mine even at the cost of my sister's health. I ended up breaking up with him over it, and he was forced to move in with his mom, who then found out that he had been in touch with his abusive dad who was twisting his view on how a relationship should work. Last I heard was that his mom was kicking him out as she would not have anyone in her house that was in contact with her ex, and that he had tried to go live with his dad, but his dad had refused. I was completely no contact with him, so his mom was the one who had told me this. I'll call my ex Rob and his ex's mom Sandra to make things easier. I hadn't heard from Rob in weeks, but yesterday he showed up at my house. I had the chain on my door, so I opened it with that still attached. No way would I let him in. He basically told me that he had nowhere to live. His mom isn't speaking to him, and his dad won't put a roof over a grown man's head. His words, not mine. He asked if I would take him back or at least let him live with me. No way in hell would I get back with him, and getting him out the first time only went easy because his mom stepped in to help. He had threatened to take me to court, knowing that if he did, it could take months to get him out, and then said he would only move if I gave him 10,000 pounds. I contacted his mom, who was furious about that, and she turned up with his brother and forced him out. I told him that there was zero possibility of him ever living with me again and that we were 100% over. He started shouting at me and calling me all sorts of names, so I threatened to call the police if he didn't leave and shut the door. I have cameras all over my house, so I caught everything he did and said on camera and have saved it to a USB just in case. He then went crying to all our mutual friends, and it managed to get back to his mom. She called me and asked what had happened. I told her, and she then informed me that she had put her house up for sale and was moving 300 miles away to be nearer her other son. Her and Rob had a huge argument about this, and she finally kicked him out. Since then, he's been couch surfing, but with Christmas coming up, his friends aren't really happy with having him on their couches when they have kids and are meant to be enjoying the festive season. He's been kicked out of 3 friends' houses in 10 days. She told me I was right to refuse him, but I've since had other friends say that they feel sorry for them and that I can just let him stay in my spare room until he's back on his feet. I then asked them to put him up, but they said they would.